This week is Chanukah. I know, it's exciting, right? Chanukah, all food, it's all good.
I get it covered.
That's right. So this week is Chanukah. So we have to start preparing a little bit, you know? Chanukah could be one of those holidays where you spend 30 seconds on it, you know, when you light the candles and that's it.
Yeah.
Or it could be like 8 days long, you know? So we have to prepare a little bit. It's interesting that from a historical perspective, the miracle of Chanukah wasn't just, you know, for that little time period or those 8 days. What happened historically is that once the Chashmonaem, once that family of Kahanim were able to, you know, get rid of the Greeks from the Beis Hamikdash, they were able to, you know, overrun them. It wasn't just getting them out of that particular place. They got them out of Eretz Yisrael, and they took control of the country. They set up a machlos, they set up a kingdom. And the Chashmonaem, the kingdom of the Chashmonaem lasted for close to 200 years. 200 years. And the truth is, in the Rambam, when he talks about, as he sort of writes an introduction to the halachas of Chanukah, the Rambam says a little bit of what the nace is, what the miracle of Chanukah is, what exactly we're celebrating. He stresses this point. Not just the fact that they won the war, and not just the fact that there was the miracle of the oil, but the fact that they established a malchus for close to 200 years, giving the Jewish people sovereignty over the land. That was a huge deal. So what happened to the Chashmonaem after those 200 years? So this is where it's a little bit tragic. The Gemara says that after 200 years, there was a person by the name of Herod, King Herod. Those of you that have been to Israel on the tours, King Masada, Herod is like a popular name in these things. Who was Herod? Herod was an Eved. Herod was a slave. He was a slave to the Chashmonaem, again 200 years after Chanukah, and he led a coup. He led a revolt against the Chashmonaem, and he wiped them out. He wiped them out, and he took over the Malchus, and he was basically a puppet for the Roman government, and that was the beginning of the end. So, unfortunately, even though what starts off is amazing that the Chashmonaem take over, they bring back, they get rid of the Greeks, and they give the Jewish people sovereignty over the land, and they establish a kingdom, and that's the celebration of Chanukah. It's Gavaldik. But Lamaisa, 200 years later, the Gemara says so much so that they were destroyed by Herod, that anyone who claims to have yichus going back to the Chashmonaem is himself a slave, because there was not the bloodline was completely done. So that's tragic. So the question is, what happened then? Like, why such a thing happen? So there's a famous Ramban. The Ramban writes in Parshas Vayeshev that the reason why such a difficult end happened to the Chashmonaem who gave us Chanukah is because they made a big mistake. The mistake was that in the aftermath of the nace of Chanukah, it was Gavaldik that they got rid of the Greeks, but the problem was that they took the Malchus themselves. They took over the kingdom themselves. The pasuk says, Yaakov Avinu blessed Yehuda, Yosef shaves from Yehuda, that the throne should always be in the tribe of Yehuda, and David HaMelech and his family. So the Chashmonaem made a mistake. They were Kahanim. They were not from the house of David. And the problem was, instead of giving over the Malchus once they got rid of the Greeks to a descendant of David HaMelech, they took the Malchus over themselves. Says the Ramban, even if there was no one at the time that was maybe worthy of being the king outside of the Chashmonaem family, says the Ramban, what they at least should have done is establish a figurehead or something. Have this person, he's officially the king, although we're the ones running the government, but at least like in England, you have sort of like an official, queen or whatever. So have something like that. Says the Ramban, because they didn't do that, because they took over the Malchus themselves, 200 years later, they were wiped out as a punishment. So here's the problem. There's a number of problems. First of all, if what they did was so terrible, in terms of taking over the leadership and not giving it over to the house of David, then why 200 years later? What took 200 years? Also, the Rambam says that's part of the celebration, the fact that there was a Malchus of the Chashmonaem for 200 years. So again, is it bad? Was it good? Like, what is it? And what were they thinking? I mean, these were big tzaddikim. These were clearly big tzaddikim. The miracles of Chanukah happened through them. So what were they thinking of not giving over the Malchus to David? How could they possibly think that they should be the kings and not a descendant of David HaMelech? So what were they thinking? So it's a lot of confusion in terms of this. Okay, so let's put that to the side for a second, and we'll go to the parsha. This week's parsha, we have the one of the more difficult stories of the selling of Yosef. Right, the Yosef is sold into slavery by his brothers. So there's a pasuk like this. After the whole thing is done, and again the brothers plot against him, and instead of killing him, they put him in a pit, and eventually they sell him to slavery to Egypt. So the pasuk says that after that, Yehuda starts getting involved in finding a wife and getting married and having children, and unfortunately the first two children die, and eventually he has other children. A whole story about Yehuda's family. So Chazal say in the Medrash the following thing, to explain sort of the transition from the story of Yosef being sold to this whole episode with Yehuda. Chazal say the following thing. The Chazal say that when Yosef is being sold, this is sort of the picture, the big picture that Chazal say. Chazal say Yosef is sitting and mourning over his difficult situation of being in Egypt. Ruvain is sitting and mourning over his difficult situation, the fact that he made a mistake and he feels guilty about the whole thing, so he's doing tshuva. Yehuda is getting involved in his personal inyanim of finding a wife and getting married. And the Shvatim are busy doing their things. And everyone's doing their thing. And say Chazal, what is Hashem doing? Hashem is building the soul of Mashiach. That's Chazal say. Hashem is building the soul of Mashiach. Because eventually, when Yehuda does eventually have children that last, Peretz and Zarach, that's the forebearers to eventually, Dov and Melech, eventually leading to Mashiach Tzidkenu. So it's another Chazal describe the situation over here is a very interesting way. Again, the description is everyone is doing their thing. Yosef is doing his thing, Reuven is doing his thing, Yehuda is doing his thing, the Shvatim are doing their thing, and what is Hashem doing? Hashem is building Mashiach. It's a funny way to describe it. Why of all times would Hashem be involved in building the soul of Mashiach right now when everyone is so disjointed? Alright, so it's like this. Every day in davening, the first bracha Shemona, we say the first bracha, and then we end off bracha to Hashem Magen Avram, the shield of Avram. There's another person in Jewish history that's described as having a shield. That's David, Magen David. Magen David is a symbol, that star of David. It's also, there's a bracha that we say, bracha to Hashem Magen David, at the end of one of the brachas after the Haftarah on Shabbos is Magen David. So what does it mean exactly? What's the significance? Magen Avraham and Magen David. So it's like this. Rav Tzadok explains it's a very, very important, very, very fundamental idea in Yiddishkeit. Rav Tzadok says like this. He says there are two sources of a Jew's holiness. Every single Jew is holy, every single Jew is special, every single Jew has a certain place in God's kingdom. And there are two sources of that significance. Every Jew is significant from two levels. There's one aspect of a Jewish person's significance in terms of where you come from, in terms of what you're a part of. Every single one of us come from that place that's called Avram Avinu, that person of Avram Avinu, the Avos HaKadoshim, the Avos and Emos. We're part of the Jewish people, the collective whole of the Jewish people, and being part of such a family gives significance to every member of that family. Right? So everyone has a last name, right? So if a person is coming from a chashuva family, then it gives a certain chashivas to the person because you're part of that. There are certain cultures where the last name is what you say first, right? I think in the East, like in China and so on, I think they say the Korean, they say the last name first, right? Because what is the last name? The last name means that I am chashuv. Who am I? I'm part of this family. There's certain chashivas to that, and the Rebbeinu Shalom promises that every single Jew that's either biologically coming from the house of Avraham Avinu or through conversion is part of the family of Avraham Avinu is solidified, is concretized, is saturated with Kedusha by the very fact that you're part of that lineage, that you're part of that world. This is what's called Magen Avram, the shield of Avraham Avinu, that Hashem protects Avraham Avinu. What does it mean to protect Avraham Avinu? He's not alive anymore. The protection of Avraham Avinu means that Hashem promises and guarantees that the Kedusha that's inbred within a Jew, because of where you come from, is guaranteed to be protected. There's nothing anyone can do to undermine that. We can cover it over. We can make life complicated. We do all sorts of things. But ultimately, your last name is your last name. It is what it is. That's who you are. There's no way around that. Thank God. That's Magen Avram. Says Rav Tzadok, by the way, there was a certain exile redemption whose main objective was to clarify to the world this truth, and that was Yetzias Mitzrayim. The entire inyan of the exile of Egypt and the redemption from Egypt was to scream to the world, was to proclaim to the world this idea, which is the Jewish people are holy as a people. That's what it is. We're holy as a people, and every single individual is holy vis-a-vis their connection to the people. That's what the exile of Egypt was about. Was the efforts to undermine our existence as a people, and the redemption from Egypt was to establish the greatness of the Jewish people as a people. That's all Magen Avraham. But says Rav Tzadok, besides that, there's another source of a Jew's Kedusha. Unrelated to the fact that you happen to come from Avraham Avinu. And what is that? It's you by yourself. There's something that's called the kedusha that you have because of your last name, so to speak. And then there's the kedusha that's inborn, it's inherent, and there's something you can do to destroy it. That's that's within you because of your first name, so to speak. So there's something that's called the kedusha of who you are vis-a-vis your attachment to Avram. And then there's the fact that Rebbeinu Shalom loves you and pays attention to you and is bound to you because of who you are, just in a vacuum. And every single one of us has a connection to Rebbeinu Shalom on these two levels, based on your last name, so to speak, and based on your first name. The concept of mugging David. See, who is David HaMelech? David HaMelech is the king of the Jewish people. Avram Avinu is the father, and David HaMelech is the king. What's a king? A king requires individual subjects, right? A father is not the king of his family. Why? Because they're too enmeshed. You know what I'm saying? The individual pieces of the family, the individual members of the family are not individual enough for the father to be seen as a leader of a group like that. He's a father. That's all. They're one on some level. A king, the definition of a king is that I am me, and you are you, and everyone is an individual person in their own little bubble, but there's a king over, sort of unifying the direction and the motivation and the identity of all these individuals, but we remain as individuals. Magin David means, who is David HaMelech? The Malchus of David HaMelech, let's understand, the kingdom of David HaMelech is a kingdom which is trying to express the holiness of an individual Jew as an individual. Not just as you are because you're part of a family tree that goes back to Avraham Avinu. Who you are as an individual. This is Magin David. Magin David means just as Hashem protects and insulates the kedusha that you have because of who you are as a Jew, as in terms of Avraham Avinu, a descendant. Magin David means Hashem also guarantees and protects your kedusha as you are as an individual person, unrelated to your family, unrelated to your children and grandparents, and so just who you are in a vacuum. This is Magin Avram, Magin David. The essential role of Mashiach, which is obviously, the greatest of the line of David HaMelech, is not to show the world or to show us the holiness of the Jewish people as a people. That was already taken care of by Yitzias Mitzrayim. The ultimate goal of Mashiach is to reveal to each and every one of us and to the whole world the kedusha that we have as individuals. This is why, by the way, even the symbol of the Magin David, the star, right? You think it's like historically, it's a very funny zach. Like, it's a very strange thing of what the significance of this star is and how far back it goes. But one of the ways to think of it is that it's basically two triangles, right? One going down, one going up, right? That's sort of how and then they come together. That's a Magin David, right? There's a triangle has 3 points. So one triangle that goes down, that's corresponding to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. That's the kedusha of the Jewish people as a whole. And then there's another star, triangle, another 3-point, triangle that's coming up, connecting to that, which is Kohen, Levi, Yisrael, individual Jews. And the Magin David, the Sar of David, means the integration of both. It means that we recognize that we're holy because of where we come from, our last name, but we're also holy because of our first name. This is the difference between, so Yosef, for example. Yosef, of all the tribes, Yosef HaTzadik is the one that brings to the Jewish people the concept and the feeling of Magin Avraham. So Yosef HaTzadik, it says in Pasuk, Elo told us Yaakov Yosef, that Yosef was very, very strongly connected to his father. Yaakov and Yosef had a very strong relationship. And so Yosef is sort of the linchpin. Yosef represents sort of the last name of the Jewish people. Like you have the world of Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, where that's where we come from. And Yosef is the one that takes that yichus, that family tree that we come from, and reminds us of it, and unifies the Jewish people, and makes us a people because of it. This is why Yosef, on some level, is himself kind of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, because he himself produces Shvatim, Menashe and Ephraim. So the entire essence of Yosef HaTzadik is that when Yosef is around, there's no individuals. When Yosef is around, it's like in Korea, you say your last name first. That's what Yosef is. When Yosef vanished, when Yosef was sold into slavery, what Chazal are saying is that when the last name goes away, when you're not aware of your family anymore, you're not aware of all that, then what has the opportunity to emerge and to become clarified is who you are as an individual and your significance as an individual. Sometimes a person's like this, where let's say if the family that they're a part of is such a very hush of a family, or very well known, very famous or whatnot, they could feel overwhelmed by that, and they could feel stifled by that, and they could feel sometimes they need to find their own way. And so they have to sort of maybe sometimes go to a different location, simply just to get away from their last name sometimes. And sometimes it's healthy, sometimes it's not, but there is significance in the fact that to find your individual self, sometimes it takes for the last name to be a little bit hidden. And so the ultimate goal is for the Jewish people to be proud of the family that we're a part of, the Magin Avraham, but also to be proud of the Magin Davids, to be proud of the individuals that we are as well. And the ultimate goal of Mashiach, as I said, Mashiach is really the one that pronounces the holiness and the significance of the individual. That's what Mashiach is about. So this is exactly what Chazar is saying in that medrash. Yosef is now gone. And when Yosef, the last name sort of, when the family tree, when that, who you are as part of your family, when that's gone, then Chazal described the following thing. Then Yosef is doing his thing, Yehuda is doing his thing, Reuven is doing his thing, the Shvatim, everyone's doing their own individual thing. And you know what's beautiful from that? What's beautiful is that at that same moment, Hashem is building the soul of Mashiach. Because that's exactly what Mashiach is. What Mashiach is the expression of the holiness of the individual vis-a-vis you. Just who you are in a vacuum. The Rebbeinu Shalom's relationship with you, not because of ancestors and children, who you are. That's what Mashiach is about. And this is how, the strange thing of what Galus is about. Galus obviously is a tragedy, right? It's not a good thing. But Rav Kook pointed out, it's interesting, Rav Kook actually said that there's something positive to Galus. Because part of going into Galus, we've lost track of Shvatim, what tribe you're in, what tribe you're not. And the nature of Galus is that we're kind of nomadic and everyone has to find their own place. And that's beautiful on some level, because in that sort of vacuum, in that absence of Yosef, when we don't know our last name anymore, then now you finally have an opportunity to discover your first name. And that itself is preparing the road for Mashiach. This is what the Yontif of Chanukah is. The Yontif of Chanukah is a Yontif that's celebrating the Jewish people's transitioning from a time of prophecy, from a time of Tanakh, to a time of Torah Sheba'al Peh, as I've mentioned many times. What's the difference between Tanakh and Torah Sheba'al Peh? Very simple. Tanakh, there's nothing you can do to add to it. You could come up with all the fantastic poetry you want, you're not going to be able to add it to Tanakh. Tanakh is what it is. It's like a family. There's nothing you can do. It's not about you as an individual, it's about the family. That's what Tanakh is. It's not a story of individuals, it's a story of the Jewish people. What's Torah Sheba'al Peh? What's the oral Torah? Your own ideas. The oral Torah is malleable. It's something that there's room for you to give your own ideas and your own interpretation. And obviously there's guidelines and the structures of how to do it. But conceptually, everyone has their portion of Torah, their own ideas, their own perspective, and Torah Sheba'al Peh invites that. The Yontif of Chanukah is the celebration of the Jewish people's transitioning from just thinking last name to finally being able to appreciate our first name. And this is why the Chanukah candles are themselves expressed that, right? On the one hand, every single individual person lights their menorah based on every single individual day. It's very detailed. It's very individualized, while maintaining a certain sense of family. Right? Chanukah is also related to family. That's one, per house and so on. But in that structure of the house, don't lose sight of your individuality. That's what Chanukah is about. So here's the idea. Let's go back to the original question. The original question was, if you remember, why did Chashmonaem not give over the leadership to the house of David? The answer is, the Chashmonaem, the very fact that they saw themselves as the vehicle to bring to the world the Yontif of Chanukah, which is the expression and the celebration of the individual, that itself means David HaMelech. That is Magin David. Therefore, they saw themselves as being the spiritual heirs of David. They weren't physically, biologically coming from the house of David, but they were representing what David HaMelech means. David HaMelech means the king of the Jewish people. Magin David means the celebration and the significance of the individual Jew. That's exactly what they brought to the world with Chanukah. And as long as they kept that mindset, that we are here as the spiritual heirs and the spiritual representatives of David HaMelech, their malchus was holy and kosher. It's true. The problem is, 200 years later, they got full of themselves. 200 years later, they began to think of themselves as the king, and not just the spiritual heirs of David, trying to give the Jewish people the ability and the freedom to find themselves. Rather, they became more totalitarian and dictator type. So then, now you're not David. And once you're not David, you don't deserve the Malchus anymore, and it's taken away. That's what's interesting if you think about it, even in terms of the Kohen's, the Yichus, the family tree of a Kohen. Obviously, on the father's side, the Chashmonaem were not from David, because if you go back father, you go to Aaron, who was not, he's Aaron, he's a Levi. But Aaron's wife, if you think about it, going all the way back, Aaron's wife was the sister of Nachshon and Aminadav, who was from the tribe of Yehuda. So it's an amazing thing. Even within Kahanim, on the feminine side, on the mother's side, they actually can go and find themselves to the family of Yehuda. So as long as they see themselves in that motherly role of giving the Jewish people their room to find themselves as individuals. See, the father and mother is different like this, right? Person's yichus in terms of halacha, what family you're a part of, that's the father. It's the father. But in terms of whether you're Jewish or not, as an individual, you in a bubble, I don't care what family you are, but who are you? That's the mother. So as long as the Kahanim were acting as the representatives of David and creating a malchus which was focused on giving the Jewish people the room of finding their own individuality within the world of Torah, then they were connecting to their lineage in terms of their mother's side. And on their mother's side, they're from the tribe of Yehuda. But as 200 years later, when they switched over to be more the aggressive and the authoritarian, you know what I mean? And it's not about you, it's about us. Well, now they're connecting to their father's heritage, and their father is not from the tribe of Yehuda. And this is what the Yom Tov Chanukah is. The Yom Tov Chanukah is celebrating this nakuda of who we are as a people, but within that framework, everyone lights their own menorah based on the day. It's the individual as well. And we have to remember that the Magen Avram and Magen David, the Rebbe Shalom loves us because of our last name, but just as much as our first name as well. And that's what Mashiach is about. Mashiach is about allowing this to come out. Let me end off with just a quick mice. It's not really even a whole story. It's really just, you'll see, it's just a thing. The story goes that the Mezritch Magid, the great Magid of Mezritch, so when he was young, I was a little kid. They were obviously, in those days, people were very, very poor, klal. But even wealthy people, their houses were made of wood, and God forbid if there was a fire, it could decimate an entire town. So the Maisa goes, there was a fire that ravaged through his hometown, and his parents were poor; they barely had anything. But the mother was my mom is distraught, and she's looking through the ashes looking for something, it seems. And so the story goes, the legend is that the Mizrach Shemagid, as a young boy, turned to his mother and said, "Mom, why are you so bothered? What in particular are you looking for?" So she says to him, "Listen, we didn't have that much stuff to begin with, so I'm not so upset about that. But I had a yichus brief. I had a family tree. I had a piece of paper that showed our yichus, our lineage, going back to David HaMelech, going back to, and that's the a prized possession of the family, and it's complete ashes. I'm looking for that." So the story, the legend is that the Mizrach Shemagid, as a boy, said to his mother, he said, "Don't worry, we lost that. I'll start a new yichus from me and on." That's Mizrach Shemagid. That's what Mashiach is about. Mashiach is about, it's Gavaldik where you come from. Mashiach is really about who are you. That's really what Mashiach is about. The more we could answer that question with a resounding, I'm a Jew, I'm holy, I'm who I'm supposed to be, I have a good first name, you know what I'm saying? That's bringing the light of Mashiach to the world. We should be able to experience that both individually and collectively. Thank you, Hashem.